Those of you from the early days of the internet, what online mysteries do you remember that remain unsolved? Back in the days of war dialing, there were so many weird phone numbers that were discovered that led to weird recordings or just did weird crap. I'd love to hear about what some of those were about. We found one once where it was just some old English sounding gentleman who answered. You could ask for anyone, even something obviously troll, like is Galaxx the Eater of Worlds there? And the man would just reply, oh no, I'm sorry. They are out right now, then hang up on you. We didn't annoy or harass it, but we did call a few times to check if it was still there, and it always was. We always assumed it was some intelligent asset, and if you could say the right thing to it, you would activate it. I had a previous Reddit account made during the Dig Exodus. This was at least a decade ago, when Reddit was pretty new. I came across a post from a guy who swore that a particular website that looked like a generic local news site with the usual app and reuters news feeds was actually a government-run intelligence program. It functioned like a numbers station in plain sight, meaning that the exact wording used would match up with a one-time use pad and provide intelligence info. I cannot remember the exact website, but it looked unimpressive and the domain was registered in Bahrain, despite appearing to cater to a mid-size US city. He then said he was being harassed in real time since he made that post. Then he said he got doxxed and strangers were calling him telling him to cut it out. I tried to reply to his post a few minutes later, but then found that his Reddit account and every post he made were deleted. What was that all about? Some similar government conspiracy sounding stuff happened to me years ago. I started a VPN business circa 2009, right around the time of the Arab uprising, and before the VPN business market was as popular as it is now. Most providers were deploying PPTP and OpenVPN, but I deployed SSTP, which works over port 443, uses regular HTTPS, and worked with the built-in Windows VPN client. Needless to say, in the span of about 3 months I had massive sign-ups from China, the Middle East, and Northern African countries. I never made an effort to hide my identity and ran the business out of my house. One day the proverbial men in black showed up, black suits, sunglasses, black Suburbans, and so on. Only, they had the olive-colored skin of someone who was of Middle Eastern or Northern African descent. They asked for me by name, asked if I ran this VPN service, identified themselves as diplomatic representatives from an embassy in DC, and politely asked me if they could come in and ask me some questions. I was young then, so I said sure, come on in. Well, the meeting didn't last very long. They started asking me if I understood what was happening with the Arab Spring. They referenced Egypt specifically, and if I would block users from certain countries being able to connect to my service if they requested. When I said no, not without a court order, they became agitated and then asked who else was involved in helping me with the business. They then started naming my mom, my sisters, my daughter, who didn't live with me, and several of my close friends. It was the scariest moment of my life, and I was sitting there alternating between panic and disbelief. I told them none of those people were involved, and they said okay, well why don't you think about what the best thing for you to do is? We will be back in touch. I spoke to some friends in the security world and all of them said to just shut down. Even if they didn't do something criminal, they'd probably just sue me into bankruptcy. So after starting a VPN base, and in 3 months having hundreds of customers, I refunded all my customers for any unused services, and shut my doors. Literally overnight. I never heard from, nor got a visit from the Middle Eastern men in black again. Grungeco.com/torment was crazy to me. I don't remember how I found it, but it started you out on this puzzle that wasn't too difficult to solve, but it just kept giving more puzzles with increasing difficulty. I remember having a full notebook from writing stuff down trying to figure out how to solve them. I eventually got stuck and went to some forums to find out there were people who put in some work trying to complete it, but I don't believe anyone ever reached the end. They eventually took it down, and the creator put up a new series of puzzles that was solved within the first couple days. I was always curious what was at the end of that Grungeco puzzle. That website is what made me have a love for puzzles and riddles. Cracked had an article about this. I know, but there was an old forum a girl had about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I think. where she had over 40k posts, all by herself. As in, she would make topics and reply to them as the series progressed, or she watched seasons and episodes. Ike 4chan caught wind and started raiding, so she deleted the site altogether. I really wish I had more context, because it seems so interesting. That cracked article was super misleading. However, the poor girl got majorly harassed, but she wasn't making posts all by herself. It was a fan site for a specific Buffy actor, and it had a solid number of users who were active on different boards. However, there was one dedicated board just for news updates. This girl was posting news about the actor just basically as a feed for the fans. Maybe a little obsessive, but not creepy, and not some single person posting endlessly by herself. 4chan and cracked spread this news and destroyed her fan site. Edit. Thankfully she recovered from having her website destroyed, and she is still obsessed with James Masters. Now she uses Twitter instead. Back before the internet, before AOL was a big thing, me and some buds made a relay message setup that used some abandoned telegraph lines in my town. We were too cheap to pay for the phone time and C64s. And we made these cards that would send out electrical pulses that would be deciphered on the other end. It was painfully slow, like 2 bits a second, and could take an hour to get a large message across. Also one person could send a message at a time or the receiver would get mixed letters. Now that I think about it, it was basically a telegraph that was operated by computers. Our computers would identify themselves to each other, and we could see who sent the message looking at a 3-digit identification code that would be sent with a message automatically. One day I was sitting listening and waiting for my friend to send me something. We would call ahead to let each other know before we sent so the other party could receive. I started getting a message that had no identifier and it read something like, "If memory doesn't fail me, Echo Cadillac. 275,610,473,018,493. It spat random numbers. The message played for about 5 minutes and wasn't too long, but I called my friend and he got it too. We never did figure out what that was. It was a closed system on abandoned telegraph lines that had been cut. We ended up blaming it on a computer error in BASIC or something, but it never happened again. Or maybe some kid from school found out and wanted to mess with us. Who knows? Fun times. Who wrote SQL Slammer, an early internet worm? I work in cybersecurity. I remember at the time it was released it was crazy the damage it did. Took down 90% of all infectable hosts within 10 minutes or so. Many believe it was an early cyber weapon test. If you get into the technical details of the thing it's wild. So crazy efficient its entire source code sat in a single packet. Here is my story of SQL Slammer, posted before. When the SQL Slammer worm hit my workplace, it was like 5 AM after our yearly holiday party. Someone else got paged first, came in and decided to page me. I tried to log in remotely, but all the network links were so saturated I couldn't really troubleshoot anything. The guy that paged me neglected to tell me that there was a worm on the loose, so I just threw on shoes and a jacket, not changing out of my PJs and headed to the office. I got into the office and was able to console into my devices and saw that every link coming out of the server farm was at 100%. I asked the other guys what was going on, and then they told me about SQL Slammer. I called my boss and told him to stop by McDonald's and buy $40 worth of breakfast sandwiches because we were about to have a lot of hungry and hungover people at work. The friker shows up with 4 sandwiches, one of which he ate. Once he realized the scope of the problem, he turned around and got another 40 to 50 of them. I ended up spending 15 hours sitting in the data center in my pajamas. Fun day. Fun postscript. We were infected through one of our one links. I previously had an access list on the one link that would have prevented infection, but my boss told me it was too restrictive and that maintenance on the access list would be too time consuming. I downloaded a MOHA key generator. The icon was just a picture of a smiley face. Nothing too irregular for a key generator of the time. I was used to them having funky icons and playing sweet MIDI tunes. A box pops up showing that it's actively deleting your Windows folder, and when you try to mouse over the cancel button it is bounced away. The screen goes blank and displays a message about how this would have sucked if it was a real virus. A few seconds later your screen comes back and you go change your pants because this isn't even your computer.